To the Batmobile. Let's go.
Come on, bub, for old time's sake, huh?
Harley Quinn, nice to meet ya.
Pardon my French. Fuck those fuckers.
My favorite Marvel character ever, but you should never meet your heroes because honestly, he's a bit of a dick.
Now might be a really good time for you to get angry.
That's my secret, Cat.
I am inevitable. Smash!
Right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Comics in Motion podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Chris Phelps, and my co-host and very good friend is Mr. Dave Horrocks.
Hi Chris, and hello to our listeners out there. Welcome to Comics in Motion TV and movie reviews for shows that are based on comic books. Myself, I'll be reviewing from the perspective of a long-time comic book reader.
And I'll be reviewing from the TV and movie perspective.
And what we also love to do is we also love to spoil the hell out of everything we review. So if you haven't watched our choice of the week, then we'd advise you to proceed with caution. And remember, Chris, with an average podcast comes no responsibility.
I thought you were going to ask me to say that, Dave. I was like, what? Hey, I don't do that.
Well, it's never been more apt than this week's choice, has it? But I would say, so this is coming out on Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving to all of our American listeners over there. We thought we'd pick something that was kind of in that wheelhouse. Thanksgiving does appear, even though it's not really a Thanksgiving movie. And obviously we don't celebrate it as such over here. But Chris, I will be watching Planes, Trains and Automobiles. So that's my little Thanksgiving kind of tradition there. Now, Chris, what we're going to review this week?
Well, Dave, it's quite apt because it's Thanksgiving, and I've got a little story behind this as well. But we're going with the 2002, Dave, Sam Raimi, Spider-Man.
Awesome. Now, come on then. What's the little story?
Well, I'll tell you a little bit about the movie myself. I have had this movie on, I've had it about 3 or 4 times on DVD, Dave. I don't know why. And I actually found a brand new copy of it the other week, and it's still in the cellophane. I don't know how I've even got it, but I've had it on various different things with DVDs. So I've got it. It's one of the ones that put Tobey Maguire on the map, didn't it? And I know the first and second one, especially, I think the second one's thought of better than this one, but I love this. I actually went to the cinema to watch this. I remember going and seeing it and just loving it and loving the whole, it reminded me a lot of the 1960s Spider-Man comics because Peter had a little bit of, a little bit of something behind him. He could crack a few jokes, but the vulnerability of the Peter Parker, which is what I like. And I have a big fondness for Andrew Garfield. I know a lot of people don't like their movies, but I think he's a great Peter Parker and the vulnerable and stuff. I think Tobey Maguire and all three of them, I like all three of them as Spider-Man, but this for me was one of the first ones where it sort of blew me away, Dave. And I know the PlayStation 5 has just come out on the 19th, last week. And I did buy Spider-Man Miles Morales and the Spider-Man remaster for my PS5, Dave. And I will say to you, I am absolutely loving it considering I never played him.
Awesome stuff. Now, Chris, I there was no way I wasn't going to go and see this at the cinema. With some of the things, I kind of quite happily just wait until it comes out on video or DVD now, later on. But, growing up, Spider-Man was just everywhere, wasn't he? And even though he wasn't kind of, up there with Superman and Batman, in terms of just the iconography of it, I had Spider-Man lampshades and things, and it was just everywhere. So we'd come back and reviewed was it 77, the TV series, the pilot. And, at the time, as a young kid, I'd kind of liked that, but it was slightly ridiculous. I also remember quite vividly, actually, that on the Kenny Everett show, he used to do a sketch. Well, he probably only did it once, but he climbed through the window in his Spider-Man outfit, and then he stands up next to the urinals. He's like searching for a zipper or something, and he can't find it, and then obviously he has to soil himself. So these weird little memories. But this is after X-Men came out in 2000, which really kind of it started a new age of comic book movies, didn't it? I think the CGI was a bit better. And I was just wondering, okay, how is this one going to be? And even though, that some of the CGI, I think, looks a bit kind of rubbery. I don't think they quite had the motion capture nailed down at that time. I just thought it was such a leap from what we saw in the late 70s Spider-Man. I just absolutely loved it. Didn't know who Tobey Maguire was. Did have a little bit of a crush, I must admit, on Kirsten Dunst after, I saw her first in Jumanji, which, I was a kid at the time as well, guys. So it'd be weird if I just watched it last year and had a crush on her then. But yeah, so I was quite looking forward to seeing how she would be that Mary Jane as well. And yeah, there are a few things like not quite right, and I'm sure we'll get into those. But yeah, I just thought it was brilliant.
Yeah, it's funny, Dave, because it's quite synonymous. One in the early 2000s, we'd had Blade in '98, which I loved, and we've reviewed it. And then this seemed like a step up. And I know we'll get into it in the review because there is stuff that's aged it. But I do think when it's a classic and the use of New York is fantastic. And obviously, one of the big things with this movie was the fact that when obviously we had the tragedy at the Twin Towers, a lot of the promo stuff was the Spider-Man. He was actually around the Twin Towers. He even had the reflection of the Twin Towers in his eyes on the
Yeah.
posters, and he had to change all that, didn't he? And I remember it so well, Dave, because didn't it delay the movie slightly as well because of what had happened? I'm sure it got delayed or moved slightly because there was a lot, and they had to redo some of the stuff, I think, because of the movie, because of what had
Yeah,
happened.
I don't remember if it was delayed. I do remember though, like you say, I think they had some of the shot, wasn't it? Like you said, the reflection of the Twin Towers was there in the skyline and stuff. You had this, I think it was a car, a getaway car or something like that, that was being held up by webs, but between the Twin Towers. Um, and I think that that final shot at the end, when you saw Spider-Man up on the American flag, I thought that was. I was pretty sure that must have been shot after 9/11 because everyone was just so. It was just such a monumental event, wasn't it? I mean, you still think back to it
Yeah.
now. I can remember how that day unfolded quite vividly, and it shook everything, everyone for quite a while, didn't it? So, yeah, I like I say, don't know if it delayed it, but they definitely reworked some things in there.
Yeah, they did, and I think as well, Dave. What's interesting, and this is just purely from researching the stuff that's online, and that is, it was the highest selling grossing movie ever, wasn't it? At the time, it even beat Harry Potter, which had made 90 million over 3 days. This broke the 100 million mark. It was the first one to do it, and it made 114 million. So, and I remember the computer game, Dave. It was fucking everywhere. Wasn't the best game in the world. It was all right, like sort of in the middle of 5 or a 6 out of 10, but it just sold like everybody had a copy of it, if I remember rightly, and it made loads of this game, it was across like the PS2, Xbox, and GameCube at the time, the three main consoles,
Hmm.
and it was just one of the movie tie-ins that just about was a bit better because what's synonymous with gaming is movie tie-in films, Dave, are absolutely shit,
Yeah.
really bad, and this wasn't that bad. So I think it gained a lot of traction, but like you said, the phenomenon of Spider-Man was born again. He wasn't just this piss-taking character or this cartoon character, because obviously the adaptations we'd seen before, one we reviewed previously, like you say, the 77 one, was just fucking awful. So this is where in some respects, Dave, yeah, it's a Sony movie, but Spider-Man is a Marvel property. It's all that momentum building to the MCU in it.
Yeah.
Because Tobey Maguire was, I know the third one gets a slating, especially his fucking MC Hammer Flash dancing shit, David Brent stuff. But the movie's not that bad, and we do get a version of Venom in that as well, don't we? So I've seen all three of them in the cinema, and I enjoyed all three of them.
Yeah, and I think I'm sure we'll come to that. We shouldn't really have waited so long to tackle this one because, like I say, I do feel this plus X-Men. We'll forget about the Ang Lee Hulk. But,
We've been
this
there, Dave,
this plus
on trial.
X-Men, I think,
Yeah.
was the start of like a golden time for comic book movies. Like I say, we both love Blade, but it was so different, even from the original comics. Eventually they ended up pulling the comics into line with more the movie,
Yeah.
but it wasn't like this. This properly as well leaned into the comics. In X-Men, you had them all in their kind of Nick Fury, black leather suits. Whereas in this Spider-Man, it's so bright and colourful. And the Spider-Man outfit just looks phenomenal, I think. Going back to look at it now, it's like, oh wow, this, considering it's nearly 20 years ago that they generated this, I think it just looks fantastic. Especially, you've got it on your home cinema kind of thing, and big screen, that you got the Blu-ray Christmas on the HD TV. It just looks fantastic.
Yeah, it does, Dave. And I do think as well that a lot of the cinematography in this is fantastic. I mean, look, we both love New York, don't we? And I've recently been there. I was lucky enough to go at Christmas, and I just seeing a lot of the things that, it's all right. It's 20 years ago, literally, when this was filmed. It's around 2000, 2001 it was filmed. Don't matter, Dave. It's still New York. You're still seeing like the Empire State Building, Statue of Liberty. You've got all these iconic things. And I know he's based in Queens, isn't he, Peter Parker and stuff, but I just love it. I just think that it was just everything that I wanted in a superhero movie, Dave, that I'd not seen since the original Superman films, to be honest.
Yeah, and I tell you what, I mean, this had been in kind of pre-production and development hell since the early 80s, but if they'd have done the movie then, it wouldn't have come off like this. Like I say, the CGI was still a bit in development, if you like. It's good enough. But, if they'd have done it in the 80s, it'd have just been like the 70s pretty much, wouldn't it? That's all it would have been. But I'll tell you what would have made it better, Chris. Hugh Jackman was lined up to do a cameo as Wolverine in it. But like I say, 2 years prior, you'd had the X-Men. So they had him lined up, but they scrapped the plan because they couldn't get access to his Wolverine costume.
You know what? That would have been absolutely perfect, Dave.
What a lame excuse to not put him in there. The Wolverine costume, the black suit. Just give him a white fucking vest. That's all we need.
Exactly, a white vest, fluff his hair up. That's, you need some tight jeans. And I think as well, this would have been a perfect crossover because there were Sony properties, Dave, weren't they? X-Men and Spidey at this time. This would have been perfect for some sort of crossover movie. But yeah, that's fucking shocking. Shocking, that, Dave.
No. Spider-Man's Sony. X-Men was 20th Century Fox.
That's what I meant, Dave. Don't fact check, Dave. Don't fact check.
Well, the only reason I was sort of thinking was, well, because Disney obviously own the X-Men now, don't they? Because they bought out Fox. But anyway, so and who knows how they'd have worked out the rights. But that's what's reported, is that it's just because they couldn't get hold of the uniform.
Unbelievable.
Now, Chris, should we get into our trailer?
Let's go.
Who am I? You sure you want to know? If somebody told you I was just your average, ordinary guy, not a care in the world, somebody lied. Truth is, it wasn't always like this. There was a time when life was a lot less complicated. Can I take your picture for the school paper?
Sure. In this lab, we have 15 genetically enhanced super spiders.
There's 14. One's missing.
Peter, are you all right?
I'm fine.
Pete, look, you're changing. I know I went through exactly the same thing at your age.
No, not exactly.
Wow.
Peter, may I introduce my father, Norman Osborn?
Great honor to meet you, sir.
Harry tells me you're quite the science whiz. I'm something of a scientist myself.
What the hell was that? Whatever it is, somebody has to stop it.
With great power comes great responsibility.
This is my gift.
Wow.
It is my curse.
Who are you?
Who am I? I'm Spider-Man.
Do I get to say thank you this time?
much. You're not Superman, you know.
Now, Chris, another reason why this is such an iconic film. This is the first time we get to see that Marvel intro, with the comic books and everything.
Yeah.
And apart from that, I guess, with all the kind of DNA sort of CGI opening, it does remind me a little bit of X-Men. But, I mean, essentially, we get to meet Peter Parker, don't we? So he's a high school student at Columbia University. Let's start all that again. So we get to meet Peter Parker. He's a high school student, and they're out visiting Columbia University, their genetics laboratory, and he's bitten by a genetically engineered super spider, and he ends up falling ill when he gets home, and then wakes up, and he's been on the Bowflex. So he's properly buffed up there, hasn't he?
Very good reference, Dave.
Now, Chris, what do you make to the opening of this one?
That was very good, that, Dave. That was Captain America. Oh, I get that reference. Yeah, that one. Yeah. No, you know what? I've not seen it for probably 10 years, Dave. I've not watched this. And genuinely, I forgot how quickly it got into Peter being, bitten by the spider. We get to meet Harry Osborn, don't we? James Franco, and, his dad's there, William Dafoe, and he is, he's the guy, he's Norman Osborn, and you can just tell straight away. For some reason, William Dafoe's got this fucking face that you just know he's not a good guy, Dave.
Yeah.
I know is it Aquaman, he's a good guy.
But I just don't
he's
buy
still never
it.
convinced. I'm the same as you. He's just there as a fucking bastard, and he's someone you love to hate. I really struggled in Aquaman to believe he was the good guy. He was like Aquaman's mentor, wasn't he? But yeah, in this you just know straight away, and he's all nice, and he's like, and Peter's talking about the whole thesis he's done on some of his studying and all this stuff, and obviously Harry's there looking like, oh my god, but what I will say, Dave, watching this again, is this start, yeah, great. You've got the spider bites him. He's taking pictures of MJ. I know there's the bit. I've never been a fan of Kirsten Dunst, Dave, at all. And I fucking cringe when she's doing all that stupid posing for the pictures. I know that it's for the film and he's absolutely in love with this girl. But what's weird is he's Peter Parker. She's got no mention. She's with Flash, the big guy, and he's out of Magic Mike as well. That guy who plays Flash. What's his name? Yeah, he's because that bit I watch it all the time on YouTube when he goes to attack him, and obviously he's bloody throwing punches and everything.
Joe Mangley.
Mangley, yeah, that's him.
Manga Nilo.
Yes, he's the one, Dave. Out of he plays Deathstroke in the Zack Snyder one that got
is that him, is it?
Caught. That's him. Yeah, that's him.
Oh.
So he's in Magic Mike. He's been in a few things as well. So yeah, that's him. Because they're going to put his scene in Justice League, aren't they? So he's dead pleased with that. And he's also married to Dave. That Rosa Mendes, is it? He was absolutely stunning. She's stunning. Really well for himself. So I always remember that bit with Flash. But what's weird in this is there's no mention that MJ lives next door to Peter at all. And he's talking to her like he's never spoke to her before. And I find that really bizarre at the start. Only this time watching it, I'm not shitting on it like I really, really enjoy the movie. But genuinely, there was a lot of little leaps that you are supposed to go with the story, that this hasn't just happened over a couple of weeks, if that makes sense. So he gets bit within a day. Obviously, we meet Uncle Ben, we meet Aunt May. He's just sort of become a little bit arrogant, Annie Peter, and all that. And we got this little backstory. But there's loads of lovely little bits, Dave, especially the bit at the school at the start where Flash is throwing punches and he just fucking levers him. I love all that. The Spidey sense and everything's fantastic. So, yeah, I love the start of it. I'm not a big fan of Kirsten Dunst at all. I think she's completely miscast. I know the red hair and all that. I don't know what it is about her, Dave. I know you like her, but I just didn't take to her in the movies, to be honest.
Well, going into it, I like I say, as a kid, I'd watched Jumanji and, thought she was quite cute. In this role, though, I think I'm with you. And especially as the redhead, it just doesn't look right.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's because I know, she's blonde in real life and I just can't really get over it. But yeah, it is a bit of a leap, to be honest, like you say, because she does get them to stop the bus, doesn't she?
Yeah.
You know, when Peter's like trying to catch it up and stuff. This is before he gets his powers. But then she is quite sort of standoffish with him, and like you say, when he's taking a picture and stuff, it's not like someone who's grown up next door, you know. And
No.
I still think with his camera there, he's a bit of a George McFly, but you know,
he's gonna have a sore shoulder that night, Dave. Anyway, yeah, I totally agree.
But you know what, Chris? I think with all the kind of newer movies that have come out, like I say, this is 18 years old now, isn't it?
Yes.
And I think this had got worse in my memory. Probably haven't watched this for maybe 5 years or something. And I think it's just got worse as other newer things have come out, like I say, with the whole MCU and the way that all culminated with Endgame, it was just so impressive. But when this opening act starts, I'm in love with it. I just think it's so brilliant. Like I say, you can get past the little leaps with MJ and stuff, but this as well, I think, is pretty much lifted. It's very, very faithful to Spider-Man's origin. So, Amazing Fantasy 15. This was Stan Lee's story. He was kind of getting a bit bored with the comics industry, wanted to get out, and his missus just said, "Well, write the story." You know what? No, that was Fantastic Four. Forget I said that. But this was Stan Lee's story. If you believe him, Spider-Man's actually quite contested about who created him. Obviously, Steve Ditko, he drew most of his early issues, and then, but Jack Kirby had done some initial designs as well. So, but anyway, this 1962 comic, he was just thrown in there as this kind of, they were cancelling that book anyway, so he's thrown in there, but just ended up becoming, really popular. The only thing that differs is, Peter Parker is really smart, and I think he's played up to be quite smart here as well. But he gets his web shooters for free. They just come with his powers, don't they, in this?
Yeah.
And it never quite felt right to me, because in all the other incarnations, in the animated stuff, certainly in the comics, he has to build his own web shooters. So if you think about it as well, you've got a finite supply, so you can kind of play around with that in the storylines, if he runs out of web fluid and stuff. So the fact that his body just shoots this stuff out, I didn't really like that. But that didn't take away this opening act I was loving.
Yeah, I'm the same, and I think as well, Dave, we get an iconic moment, don't we? So Peter's become a bit of not a bit of an arse, I suppose, because he's got his powers and he's saving people, and he's liking the little bit of adulation he's getting, and we get the famous speech from Uncle Ben, Dave, which really is. It's been used in films afterwards, and it may have been ripped off somewhere else. I don't know, but I only ever remember it from this movie. It's one of the best lines ever. With great power comes great responsibility, Dave.
Yeah.
And I will say, what I do, you said about the webs and that, yeah, the web thing's bollocks where it's on his forearms and that, and on his wrist now. But what's great is a couple of DC references. We get Shazam, and we get Aunt May say something like, "Well, you're not Superman," and it's quite me as a fanboy and loving them little pop culture references. I'm like, oh, I like that. But yeah, we do get the whole. He wants a car like Flash, and that's what I'm saying. When she's next door and she's fighting with her dad. That's so bizarre to me because we're 20 minutes in and there's no reference. Like you've exactly said the same thing about, the pictures and all that. We get the whole just weirdness of him being next door. I just find that bizarre because I would have played up the fact that he's her best friend because he lives next door and he's been chasing her. I just didn't buy that whole dynamic with Flash. And I think he's pretty shit in it, Joe Malley, whatever he's called, who plays Flash. He's only in it briefly, but he's not fantastic. He's a bit wooden. I know it's one of his first acting things, but I do think Tobey Maguire plays Peter Parker brilliant. The vulnerability of him, the sort of self-awareness of who he is. I mean, that bit when he's waving at her at the start when they're in the lab and it's a fucking Friends, Dave. We've all been there. I don't know how many times I have been at fucking football matches at United and someone's waved at me and I'm looking behind, not seeing anyone wave, and I'm waving, and then I see someone behind me waving. I'm like, oh my God, like,
Come on, we've all done it
we've
at
all done
school,
it.
haven't we?
It's
You
the
know.
fucking worst ever, that
Yeah.
Dave. And you don't even know where to go, do you? You just sort of like,
you just
I just
end
want to
up,
swallow the
you just
fucking
end up
word
like
up.
combing your hair with your fingers, kind of thing. Like,
Yeah,
oh, yeah,
yeah.
well, I wasn't waving. It's fine, it's fine. But just to pick up a point, so when he's doing the Shazam and he goes up, up and away, that was just Tobey Maguire ad-libbing. There was nothing in the script for that. So I thought
Oh, that's
that
good.
was pretty cool. But like you say, would they be a bit more kind of anal these days about, keeping out cross-brand, cross-publisher references or something? I don't know. I mean, in Teen Titans Go to the Movies, they had Stan Lee in there, didn't they? So
That was brilliant. Yeah,
I'd
brilliant.
like to
It was
think.
good, that one. When he said about DC, he's like, "Oh, what the hell am I doing here?"
But yeah, Flash, that fight is great, and I do think Peter Parker. I think he's a bit hard done by there, isn't he? Because Flash deserved a bit of a pasting, quite honestly.
Yes.
And even MJ is giving him a bit of a hard time. It's like, oh yeah, he's okay, just his ego's hurt. It's like he was looking to beat the shit out of a guy who's about half his size, and I think what, just to pick a nit here, it's this like movie fighting, isn't it?
Yeah.
When Flash gets his hands up, it's like he's a boxer. He's got a really wide stance and everything. Come on, if he's a school bully, he's just going to shoulder charge him into the lockers and beat the living crap out of him. Or he would try to anyway. So, yeah, I did like how he sort of did that. One other thing, Chris, when MJ slips over and all her food goes in the air
Yeah.
and Peter Parker catches it all on the tray, it's a fucking
Yeah.
genuine take, that.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So it looks fake, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But that is a genuine take. They had to film it like 150 or something times,
Oh
but he
my God.
actually bloody caught it on the tray. I think it was. I had to rewind that. Yeah, here we go. 156 takes it took.
Oh my God. I didn't even know that was real. I thought that was all like CGI'd afterwards.
Yeah. I mean, today you wouldn't even bother trying, would you? You just go like, right, just hold the tray, and we'll CGI in some, food and whatever. But no, 156 takes.
That's mid. I mean, it's not the same. And you've mentioned George McFly earlier, but it's like the whole milkshake bit in it, and he goes, Lou, milkshake, chocolate, and he fires it. That took fucking hundreds of times for him to get that right,
Yeah.
because he kept spilling it, missing it. And he wanted it to be authentic, like he was the man at the time, didn't he, when George comes in? But this is different level, Dave.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that. I'd love to have seen him filming that. And when he went wrong.
I've not actually seen it, but can you imagine on the, I don't know, the 76th time or something, and he gets all but one thing, and it's just like, oh, for fuck's sake, can you not just CGI that in? But
That's clever, that you know what? That's brilliant, that David. That's a top bit of knowledge. I didn't even know that.
yeah,
I'm
no, I
gonna have
think
to go
it's
back and watch
phenomenal.
it now.
Yeah,
I am. I'm gonna have to watch that bit.
it is genuinely impressive. It'd be one of those where you'd be trying to do it to your mates, and filming it at home and sticking it on YouTube these days. Probably you'd be like, "Whoa, get it in." But getting back to what you were saying about that speech from Uncle Ben, you know what? I don't know if I'm just becoming more of a softie, Chris, but I don't remember that speech getting to me quite like it did this time.
It did to me. Kind of lumping my throat and everything. It's like wiping a tear out my fucking eye, Dave. Like, just thinking, oh my God, Sam can't see me. She's watching the soaps, and I've got my laptop watching it. I'm like, oh my God.
Isn't that
was
weird?
the same. Yeah.
That is
honestly.
weird, but I think it's because you know what's coming as well. And Tobey Maguire, I think, sells it that he's just like a typical teenager, isn't he? Just, the world owes him a living kind of thing, and just, stop acting like my dad. And he just sort of, Uncle Ben, he just sort of takes it, doesn't he? He's like, no, fair point. I'm not your dad, whatever.
Yeah.
But you could tell, like, he's sort of a bit crushed as well, because he loves the bones off Peter, and just the fact that he gave him such a hard time. I was like, oh, no, don't do it. Survive this time.
You know what though, Dave, and you're right. So yeah, you're totally right. He goes into the fight then, doesn't he, with Macho Man Randy Savage?
Oh yeah,
yeah, dig it. Yeah, you got Macho Man. Now you know how much I love wrestling, especially the old school stuff. And there's so many wrestlers lost their lives because of taking gear and stuff like that, Dave. And Macho Man died of a heart attack in about 2010. I think it's about 10 years since we've lost him. If there's an ever, Dave, ever something to say to people, do not take steroids. Macho Man Randy Savage in this film is the one because his fucking head is about to explode. He looks phenomenal, but he looks like he's going to he's got no gas on him or anything. I'm looking at Dave as someone who loved him. He is bigger there than he was in his wrestling career. He is massive when he's fighting Peter, and it gives the effect completely because as a wrestling fan, I always think Macho Man's tiny because Hulk Hogan was like 6'7" or 6'6". He's a good 6'1", I think, Macho Man. But because we'd always had this thing of the big giants like the Undertaker he went up against and all that, who were just like basketball-sized wrestlers. He's a big guy, Dave, and he looks mean, doesn't he? I know it's a wrestling match and it's supposed to be staged, but it's not. But that whole fight thing's brilliant. And we get the first bit where Peter goes down and does the full Spider-Man pose in the ring, Dave. I love that bit when he's got that crappy suit on.
Yeah, no, it's good, isn't it? And you get, what's his face? Ash from, is it Living Dead? The old Sam Raimi. Evil Dead, even.
Yeah.
I can't remember what his name is, but, because he says, oh, he's the human spider. And he says, oh, that's terrible. So he's the one who deems him kind of Spider-Man. And I agree, though, with Macho Man. His veins were popping out something rotten, weren't they? It was huge. Yeah, I thought it was strange, though, because you've got this little pipsqueak, you've got scrawny little Tobey Maguire. And all, it was Buzzsaw, wasn't it? It was his name, wrestling name he was going under. And he basically, all of his entourage, all the girls are giving him a hard time. And even though, Buzzsaw's just kicked the crap out of these other huge wrestling dudes, the little pipsqueak comes in and they decide to make it a cage match. And not only that, they're giving him the full, chairs to break over his head and stuff. And it's like, come on. Surely someone, it was a bit of a stretch. Obviously, it's there. And I have seen as well, Chris, I didn't think of anything of this at the time. But, it's been pointed out that some of Peter's dialogue is a bit homophobic in this, So when he sort of says something about, did your husband make that for you or something like that about his outfit? But, I think that's just one of those that it's of the time, isn't it? That little bit of dialogue. But it's fantastic. He shows his agility. I'm still thinking, considering later on Peter Parker defends his secret identity so fiercely, he's been doing these flips and everything in high school. And then when he goes to collect his money after the wrestling match, he's got his mask off and everything. So, when Spider-Man starts showing up, you've got to think, well, there's a few people who've already seen who this guy is and can surely put two and two together.
Dave, if someone wearing a fucking pair of bifocals can't be detected as Superman throughout any fucking movie,
all right.
The intelligence of people. No, I'm not taking a piss out of you. Have you seen the Jimmy Kimmel setup where you've got Henry Cavill and fucking Ben Affleck when they're filming Justice League, Dave, in that museum?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen it? And then he comes along, doesn't he? Jesse Eisenberg, and Jimmy Kimmel keeps walking past them when they're talking, and he goes, and he's looking like that, and he goes, Superman. And he takes the glasses off, Superman, and he's pissed. And then he comes again and gets Ben Affleck to take a selfie. I only watched it the other day. Gets Ben Affleck to take a selfie of him and Superman going, he's Superman, and he's there. And Ben Affleck puts the phone above his nose and starts talking. And Batman, he goes, hang on, put the phone back there. And he goes, he's Batman. And honestly, that's like insulting your intelligence. And he's saying to fucking Lex Luthor, Superman, Batman and Superman in the same room. And he's like, what? And I love that send up, Dave. It's a proper piss take. But again, you're right. That makes no sense. I will say, though, Dave, but I was very surprised by this. I'd completely forgot. Spider-Man in this, Dave, and we don't see it in Andrew Garfield's one really. A little bit, and we certainly don't see it with Tom Holland's Spider-Man. But the killing in this, obviously Uncle Ben gets killed by the guy who's. So when he does the wrestling match, the guy who's supposed to pay him supposed to give him $3,000. He goes and give you, $100 or whatever it is, and he's fucking pissed off, isn't he? Because he's like, hang on, he says $3,000. He went, oh, you only lasted 2 minutes. What are you going to do, kid, and all this. And then the guy comes in and robs him. And he lets him go. So you see that it's almost like Superman 3 levels of like he sort of goes a bit of a baddie. But once Uncle Ben dies, Dave, and he leaves him and goes after the guy, and he kills him. And he throws him over the thing, doesn't he? And I know it's not necessarily intentional at first, but he kills him. And there's a few bits in this trilogy I forgot about where we do see a darker side to Spider-Man.
Yeah, he doesn't throw him, does he? He doesn't throw him out the window. He sort of trips.
Yeah.
But he
But
could
there's
have
no
definitely
remorse, is there?
he could have definitely saved him.
Yes. Yeah. And that explores it, I find, in the trilogy. I want to go back and watch all 3 of them now, to be honest.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. Like I say, I'd kind of forgotten how good this was. I think in the 2003 Daredevil, you kind of see a similar thing where, Daredevil's the same. He doesn't kill. So, same as Batman as well. But in the Daredevil movie, he kind of lets this guy get, steamrolled by a bloody train. And again, it's the same thing. Probably Spider-Man even more because he could have, as he fell out the window, he could have used his webs to like catch him or whatever. But I think this is a really good moment for Peter. Obviously, horrendously shit moment as well. But if you think about Spider-Man's origin, people think, oh yeah, Spider-Man, he was bitten by a radioactive spider and then became Spider-Man. Well, it's not really the case. He got bit by a spider and that gave him powers, but he wasn't a hero yet. He just had the powers.
Yeah.
And it was that talk from Uncle Ben, if you've got great power, it comes with a great responsibility. And the fact that, as this guy runs off with the money and he does nothing, he had the power to stop him and he did nothing with it. Even though he's properly shafted by the guy, you can kind of empathize or sympathize with him a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's more that moment. That's kind of his Batman's parents getting killed or Bruce Wayne's parents getting killed moment. That's that, mortifying, horrendous tragedy that happens in his life. And it's from that makes him so driven to be the hero that he becomes.
Yeah, and you know what, Dave? It's great to go through it, and I will say, and we genuinely haven't talked about this at all. However, I think we should maybe in the new year look at maybe doing, if you want to, in the schedule, do the Andrew Garfield one before we do Spider-Man 2. I'd love to know your thoughts on it, Dave, because I went to cinema to see that and I fucking loved it.
Yeah.
So I don't think Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man's that far away from Tom Holland's, to be honest. He's not so much of a wisecracker, but I really enjoyed the movies.
Yeah, I like Andrew Garfield. I never bought him as Peter Parker just because he's too tall and good looking.
Not wrong with being tall and good looking, Dave. Anyway,
yeah, I know you're tall.
Fuck off. Very
have
good.
That Jennifer
very
Grey
good.
look about you,
Yeah.
But
fucking set myself up then.
Yeah, you lit him up. So I think I have to say I think Tom Holland is my favorite just because he has that kind of wide-eyed wonder, about everything, and his introduction in Captain America: Civil War was just fantastic, and I just think, and second, I think would be Tobey Maguire for me. Like I say, it's a silly thing, because all of them are good-looking Peter Parkers, aren't they? Which always makes me laugh about, how hard done to Peter Parker feels about life. And yeah, he always does quite well with the ladies. You know what I mean?
Yeah, true.
So yeah, no, I agree. Let's do that one then. Let's do the Andrew Garfield one. I don't think the first one is as horrendous as the second one. Showing my cards a little bit. But yeah, we can go back and have a look at that one.
Yeah. Well, we will, Dave, because we know we've talked about it, and it's always something that I love. So yeah, we'll go about that. But anyway, back to this, Dave. So obviously we lose Uncle Ben. Peter's remorseful. We get the whole funeral, we get the whole thing. This is the point in the movie. So we're about 40, 45 minutes into the movie. But this is where I struggled slightly watching it this time, Dave. The leaps in the movie are not explained very well. So, at the start of the movie, Peter meets Norman Osborn. Right, he's never met him before. Harry has to introduce him, so he's heard about him, but he's never actually physically seen him. And then obviously the Green Goblin, Norman Osborn is getting sort of shut down and saying, look, this stuff is not working, blah, blah, blah. We're going to actually have to shut you down. We're going with something else. And he ends up becoming nasty. And we get a couple of things of the Green Goblin. Again, his transformation into the Green Goblin, where he's got this split personality, Dave. I know he does the experiment on himself and all that, but it just seems to happen so quick for me. And the fact that Norman Osborn then becomes a staple in Peter's life. And it doesn't seem like the timeline of the film matches to the timeline of the relationship. Does that make sense to you? I find that so bizarre. Even the Thanksgiving meal they're having where fucking Aunt May's making dinner in the apartment from nowhere. She's not even met fucking Harry as far as we can tell. And I find there's so many leaps with the movie. As much as I really, really enjoy it, I just found this time it stood out to me more than anything.
I didn't really notice that with this film, but I have noticed it with films that I haven't been so familiar with, that everything just seems to accelerate really quickly. So I picked. We did Lethal Weapon a while ago, didn't we? Two cops hate each other, or more so, Murtaugh hates. Tell me the name. What's the Mel Gibson character?
Riggs.
That's it. Yeah. So they hate each other, but then they end up having a couple of beers on the boat. Then they're best buds. And it all happens in a few minutes in the movie. And you're like, oh, come on. But because you're so familiar with it, you can't. And I think because we're used to like these high quality, TV shows now, where you get this more decompressed storytelling, where things are able to build up over, episodes and episodes. I think it becomes more jarring when it all happens quite quickly. I do think Harry and Peter are friends from high school, though. So I think they've, been friends for a while. But considering Peter's absolutely skint and Harry's like, minted, it does seem a bit odd that they'd end up living together in the same apartment.
Yeah, and we get the pretense, don't we, that Peter, that Harry had been kicked out of various different, private schools. So it's the old, he's a wild child. But we don't really get to explore that in the first one. Obviously, in the second one, it becomes a bit more prominent. I will say, Dave, that whole dynamic, how Harry ends up with MJ, and we get this thing in Times Square, don't we, where we get the Osborne Thanksgiving floaty thing, or whatever it is that they're doing, and all that. I think that's great. I do like all that, and obviously MJ's on the platform, almost like the royal family in the UK, isn't it? They're all there, like looking up and everything, and then we do get Norman, which again, it's a bit stupid because the Green Goblin takes out his son pretty much, Dave, and he could have killed Harry. That's still something watching it this time. I was like, but he wouldn't have took his son out. I just don't believe, he's got this personality. I don't think so. But I will say Willem Dafoe's voice, Dave, it's almost like Penguin levels, but it reminded me of the cartoons of the Green Goblin. So I think he plays a good part in it, Willem Dafoe.
He is a good baddie, isn't he, Willem Dafoe?
Yeah.
Like you say with, not buying him in Aquaman because he's just a baddie. He's a career baddie, isn't he? And I do think, the way he switches from, these different personalities as well, it's almost a bit Gollum-like, isn't it? From Lord of the Rings. I do think that is pretty good. Chris, we've got to talk about the suit. Right. Even at the time, this is not kind of looking back at it now. Even at the time, the Green Goblin Power Ranger suit just took me out of it. I thought it was ridiculous then. I think it looks ridiculous now. It just looks straight out of Power Rangers, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does. I will say with him though, Dave, he is an expert in fighting from nowhere, isn't he? He's a scientist, and the next minute he's doing fucking kung fu kicks and everything, isn't he, on Peter? He gives Peter a levering, pretty much.
Yeah, and this all comes back. So again, this was in some of the exposition, wasn't it? Because Norman's trying to, he's created Oscorp. They're basically trying to make this super soldier serum, pretty much. And
Yeah.
he's saying, "Oh, it was fine." The guy who's like his lead scientist, threw him under the bus, kind of thing, by saying, we should go back to formula because the tests that we had on these rats or whatever it was, they seem to become violent and a bit crazy. So that's why he tests it on himself. And then he does what happened to the rats. He goes completely balmy, but he's got this superhuman strength kind of thing, so he can go toe to toe with Spider-Man.
Yeah. Look, Dave, and I think this reels in the set. I know it's the same spiel, and apologies to everybody who listens in and goes, "Oh, we're off again, are we?" But we've got a good baddie, Dave, and it elevates Spider-Man. It does elevate Spider-Man. He's up against somebody. He's not physically imposing to Spider-Man, but he's certainly got the beating of Spider-Man. And I love the scene with the fire where the building's on fire and it's a setup, and he goes up and gets the kid. And I kept thinking, is this the one when he comes down with a dog and it's a fucking blag? It's not like, it's like the Cannonball Run where the woman's got, my baby's drowning. It's a fucking poodle or something. And it was a baby. And then the next bit I remembered, then I was like, oh, I remember this bit. And obviously the Green Goblin gives him a fucking kicking, doesn't he, Dave? And this is just before the Thanksgiving meal because he cuts Peter. And when Peter, this is where I just found that whole scene. I know I've already talked about it. I found it ridiculous that Aunt May's in this apartment and they're all there. Norman comes in, Norman Osborn, doesn't he? And he's on the edge now. He's pretty much gone full on Green Goblin. The whole split personality thing has taken over any good that was in him, like a Darth Vader type thing. And then they go in the room and Peter's above him. And he's got the blood. And as soon as he sees the blood, he knows who he is, doesn't he? And then when he comes in, and he's got the green suit, the green shirt on Peter, and he comes back in the other way. And she goes, "Oh, you've cut your hand." And that's it then. All bets are off. And I love that. The only bit that's shit, Dave, and it is shit, is when the Green Goblin blows up Aunt May's house and she's having this fucking... I don't know what she's doing. She's praying. I just don't think that hits home at all. I really don't think that hits. I think it's pretty terrible. That's probably the worst bit of the whole movie for me.
You heartless bastard.
Heartless fucking bad acting, Dave. But yeah.
So it's Rosemary Harris who plays Aunt May. And I've always found this a bit strange because... And they've kind of played around with this in the more recent Spider-Man movies, but...
Yeah.
Peter Parker's a teenager. Aunt May is about fucking 70.
Yeah.
It's like, I know it could in theory, but I mean, she's basically like his surrogate mum. And you're sort of thinking, the maths don't stack up really, do they? So I find that more ridiculous than Aunt May, because think about it, Aunt May's on her own, so she's not going to spend that, Thanksgiving on her own, is she? And she's cooked a few Thanksgivings turkeys in her time, so I don't find that bit as ridiculous.
No, all right, fair enough. What about the bit when he blows it up, Dave? Come on, you can't say that's good acting. It's fucking terrible.
No, yeah. It's
I'll give you that.
Bit soap opera, isn't it?
I'll concede that. I don't mean for you to agree with me, but I'll concede that bit. Okay, I get the context of that. I will say though, Dave, if we had to pick an Aunt May, it's fucking Marissa Tomei all day long. Let's be honest now. Let's be completely honest. You know what I mean?
But she's more like, yeah, she's more like, the age you would expect. But again, it's very... straight from the comics. That's how she's kind of drawn, and she's been about fucking 70 since the 60s.
Yep, she has. I remember the cartoons, Dave, renting it, and she was always this old dithering old Aunt May who didn't have a clue he was Spider-Man and stuff, and he'd always get in the bedroom in the nick of time, money and stuff. But she was... Her portrayal in the Tobey Maguire one, Dave, is exactly what the comics and the cartoons were, as far as I can remember, anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Now, Chris, we sort of skipped over a little bit there. The old upside down kiss.
Yes. Now we do
What
get a bit of
what did you make
nipple
of that?
action, Dave, as well. We get some
A
nipple
bit.
action as well, a little bit. I'm trying to be thinking, but well again though, it's almost that scene is very much Bruce Wayne's fucking parents' scene, isn't it? She's in an open space where it's really busy. Peter talks to her. She goes off and walks down the seediest fucking alleyway we've ever seen, with two guys looking at each other, going, "Aye, aye, we're on here." And then two other guys come. So we've got four of them surrounding her, and they're going to like basically rape her by the looks of it. And Spidey comes and does her in, and he hasn't got his mask on, and then he runs off and puts the mask on. Dave, I did like that scene. I must admit, even now, as much as I'm not a fan of Kirsten Dunst, I think that's pretty sexy, that scene. But yeah, Dave, we get a full-on frontal, a fucking wet t-shirt competition. I remember at the time it caused controversy. So I think, what was it, 2002? 24-year-old Chris Dave loved it then. I should say I don't like it now, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if it was the 80s, you wouldn't think anything of it. That was just par for the course, wasn't it? But it did, catch the eye.
Did you pause it, Dave?
But yeah, I did read that Tobey Maguire really struggled with this scene because he was upside down. They've got all this fake rain and stuff. So guess what? It's going right up your nostrils, isn't it? So it was apparently quite a difficult one to scene, but to film. But yeah, I mean, absolutely iconic, isn't it? And I love it, the fact that Spidey hanging upside down. That's one of his classic kind of poses, and so I do think it's great. I do think it is a good scene, not just because of Kirsten Dunst's wet t-shirt.
We are so fucking childish. But anyway, but no, and then obviously after that, Dave, we get the whole thing where Norman knows Peter's secret, as we said just earlier. He gets MJ, he gets a captive, and then we get this scene on the bridge, don't we? Is it the Brooklyn Bridge, Dave? I think, and he's on the Brooklyn Bridge, and he's got her, and he's got a cable car full of kids, which from nowhere just appear and start screaming on cue as the Green Goblin went. And I've also got these kids. Take your pick. But the kids are not screaming until he says it, and then they're going rah, rah, and it's like you would be screaming from the minute. And I do like that scene. And you've got the guys watching him. But again, Dave, we get a Superman 2 bit where Spider-Man's about to get fucking killed, and everyone just starts throwing debris on the side of this bridge. Now, the bridge must have been full of fucking rubble and fucking litter, because they're just lobbing stuff over the side, fucking deck chairs. We've got iron bars being thrown at the green, and they're amazing throws. Amazing throws.
You know what? I can't... I'm trying to think now. I think that was added after 9/11,
Oh, was it?
I couldn't swear on it, but I'm sure I remember reading somewhere that had been added in, because it's like a New Yorker's basically saying, fuck you, and sort of ganging up and, not so much protecting Spider-Man, but attacking the Green Goblin. But do you not think this reminds you a little bit of Dark Knight?
Yes. Yeah. When they all go, yeah.
So you've got a choice on who you're going to rescue, and so I thought that was good, but the fact that he just ends up saving them both anyway means he didn't really have a choice. I guess he did go for Mary Jane first,
Yeah.
Most of these heroes probably would, but the fact that there was no consequence to that just made me think, maybe there should have been a little bit of a consequence to making that choice, but there wasn't. And then they end up, well, he saves everyone, doesn't he? But like you say, he gets absolutely decimated then by the Green Goblin, doesn't he?
Oh, he gets levered, and we end up in that house, don't we? That which basically is the end of the film, really, don't we? He's in this sort of the derelict building, and they have this fight, and he gives as good as he gets. But as the fight goes on, Peter's becoming more and more wounded. His mask is becoming more and more impaled, and he's getting ripped off, and he's bloody and everything. And as soon as he says something about Mary Jane, how he's going to kill her slowly, then he gets that sort of Superman intentional fortitude, doesn't he, Dave? And just gives it the Green Goblin. And then what's nice is we get the little heel turn from Norman. He becomes Norman. He's like, no, Peter, please help me. And he gets to the compassion side of Peter where he's like, Mr. Osborn and all this, takes the mask off. But what he's doing is he's getting the Green Goblin's bloody hoverboard glider, in lining it up into Spider-Man. And it's a great way to kill him off, Dave. I really like that, I must admit. I don't know about you, but I thought it was really good.
It was good, but I couldn't, when Norman's playing at pulling on the heartstrings for Peter, I couldn't help but notice he's just basically pressing one button to make the glider kind of sneakily, hover up just behind Spider-Man.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, come on, it's got to be a dial or something. You can't just press one button and it does that sneaky stealth attack type thing. So, yeah, I know this is a comic book movie. It was just one of those silly things that jumped out.
It's mad, isn't it? Because you'd seen that. I'd never even noticed that, Dave. But now you've said it, I've got to go back and look at some of these things. I'm really interested in the school scene with the food and that. That's great.
It is good.
You
probably get that bit on YouTube, I imagine.
Yeah. I will. I'll have to watch it later. And again, Dave, he impales Norman. Peter takes Norman back to his house. Harry comes in, thinks it's Spider-Man. Obviously, Peter's not got his mask on, but the darkness of the room, he can't tell. And as he's about to shoot him, Spider-Man's gone.
Yeah.
And then we get the funeral scene, don't we? Harry saying, it's my dying breath, I'm going to get Spider-Man and all this stuff, But MJ kisses Peter and says she loves him. And he's like, he can't, he's got to protect her and that. But she realizes as he walks off that he is Spider-Man, which is a great way to lead into the sequel, I think. I think that's a really good leap at the end. It just adds that everyone comes out the cinema going, oh, you bastard. What I mean? I really like that, I must admit.
Yeah, no, it is good. And the fact that you've got it set up now. So Peter's obviously, still Harry's friend, but, Harry thinks Spider-Man basically killed his dad off. So, like you say, it sets that up nicely. And then you've got the thing, MJ and Peter, will he, won't he kind of thing. So, yeah, I don't even know when I watched this for the first time if I knew there was a sequel going to come out. But I remember at the time just chomping at the bit for a sequel.
Oh, it's really good. I must admit, Dave, when we do get round to the second one, I think that has got one of the most iconic superhero bits in it. It's got to be in my top 5. Is the whole subway cart scene where he's fighting against Dr. Octopus, and they have to help him as he's holding it together, and he passes out, doesn't he? And everyone's like, he's a kid, and they pass him right down the train, and they all stand in his way, don't they, to protect him?
Yeah,
I love that. Yeah. I love that scene.
It's brilliant. Really, I've got goosebumps now just thinking about it, and no, it's a brilliant scene, that one. But Chris, should we get into our final review?
Let's go.
Now, Chris, would you like to do the honours?
Of course. For me, Dave, I've been umming and ahhing over the last couple of days thinking, what am I going to score it? I think it's a great film. There's a few things, and we didn't touch on it, but when he initially starts jumping from building to building, the CGI is of its time. It's pretty poor, but it's 2001, 2002 when this was made. It's not going to be great. And that does stand out to me more than anything. That really was something where I was like, oh, that looks really bad. It almost looks like that dodgy copy the Wolverine I had where they wasn't put the CGI in. It looked pretty shit. And I actually watched something. I watched part of the Avengers, Age of Ultron. Did I tag you in on Twitter where it's the Hulk scene where he changes in like the Brazilian rainforest or wherever he is, and he changes into the Hulk and sort of wrecks this village, and they'd left out half the CGI because it was cut from the movie, Mark Ruffalo, and it looked like that bit. I was really cutting, but I think that aside, not a fan of Kirsten Dunst, but I think Tobey Maguire's great in it. Willem Dafoe's good. I think the whole movie, the setting, everything is just great. It tells a great story of Peter Parker, the vulnerability of him, the discovering himself. Like I say, the leaps are a bit too much for me. You sort of got to really, really think about what's going on when you're watching it, how far they've come and how friendly they all become by the end of the film. But yeah, brilliant. Really, really good movie. And I'm so glad we've done it. And I agree with you, Dave. We should have done this a long time ago. So I'm going to put it in Atlantis, Dave. I was going to put it in the middle, but I think it needs a bit more. It's a great film. And I think, like you, this was almost like the Hulk levels of the Ang Lee Hulk levels of on the TV in the UK for years. And I think that's why I slightly went off it, because I was like, I'm sick of fucking seeing it, on TV. So this for me, and I've seen it loads on like various Sky movies and stuff like that, but and because I've owned it. But now that I've had a break from it, I can enjoy it for what it is, and it's a great superhero movie. I really, really enjoyed it. So, what about yourself, Dave?
Yeah, so I can't argue with any of that. I mentioned before, I think I'd gone off this movie a little bit. It got worse in my memory, but certainly the opening act was so faithful to Amazing Fantasy 15, when we first saw, well, not at the time, obviously, but, I've gone back and read it since, but, the public first saw Spider-Man and his whole origin there. And the fact that it all happens so quickly, we keep going back to Superman the movie, don't we, where it took 50 minutes to actually see Superman, whereas here we do get that linear storytelling, but it all happens pretty quickly, and he gets out of high school. They did say, so Stan Lee said, he regretted Peter Parker growing up quite so fast. He wanted to keep him in school a little bit more, which is why I think they're exploring that now with the Tom Holland Spider-Man, where they're keeping him a little bit younger for longer. But yeah, no, just really enjoyed it. I think the jarring thing is I don't like the Green Goblin design. I think it looks crap. But conversely, I think Willem Dafoe is just such a great baddie, and he's a great baddie in most of the things that he plays, even when he's supposed to be a goodie. And I think the rage inside him as well that just comes out occasionally, like whether it's in the boardroom or whether it's when he's when he's the Green Goblin, I think it's just fantastic. So he is a great baddie as well. I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to put it in Atlantis as well. I do think, I did flirt with the idea of putting it to Cloud City, but because I know the second one it is probably my favorite out of the trilogy, and I know that's coming. I'm kind of marking it down a little bit because I don't think it's as good as that. But I think going back, 18 years, this is about as good a movie as we could have expected to get at the time. And I do think that has kicked off, this new generation, this golden generation of comic book movies as well. And, it pretty much changed everything after that. And people started more embracing the comics, and the colourfulness of everything. So yeah, it's fantastic.
Oh, honestly, Dave, it's good and it's refreshing to do something so that we both enjoyed as well. We've had a bit of fun at certain bits in it, but it is though, isn't it? It's nice to just do something slightly different. I know the VHS Strikes Back podcast, we absolutely just throw each other under the bus, but this was just nice. It was a nice film. It was dead easy to watch and definitely something I can watch again. I won't be taking as long to leave this out of my collection more than anything, Dave. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. And I think as well, Dave, we're going into the holiday season. We've got some cracking stuff coming up, haven't we, Dave? Now, next week's Comics in Motion TV and movie review film is the actual film that I've not seen, Dave. Now, as an MCU fan and someone who bangs on about how much I love the MCU, and originally I loved Superman and Batman, DC fanboy as a kid, and I still am. Superman's my favourite superhero. I've loved this MCU journey, but there's one film, Dave, that I have not watched, and I don't know why I've never watched it. And I was going to watch it on holiday, put it on my phone, downloaded it from Disney Plus, I just didn't get around to watching it. So next week, Dave, we are going to be reviewing Doctor Strange.
Awesome. And we were going to do Winter Soldier, which chronologically that would have been the next one that we were going to tackle. But we're on a bit of a Scott Adkins high at the minute, aren't we? So
yeah,
old Scott there does make an appearance. So I won't spoil anything other than that and say, let's just get into our trailer.
Doctor Strange, you think you know how the world works? What if I told you the reality you know is one of many?
This doesn't make any sense.
Not everything does. Not everything has to. Through the mystic arts, we harness energy and shape reality. We travel great distances in an instant.
How do I get from here to there?
How did you become a doctor?
Study and practice, years of it.
There's a strength to him.
But is he ready? Be careful which path you travel down, Strange. Stronger men than you have lost their way. I am death. In pain. You'll die protecting this world.
I can't do this.
There is no other way.
I've spent so many years peering through time, looking for you.
What's this, my mantra?
It's the Wi-Fi password. We're not savages.
Now, Chris, how can everyone get in contact with us?
I've just done that, Dave.
Did you?
No, I haven't.
I was consciously listening out for it that time.
You can call me and see you next Tuesday, Dave. But anyway, I talked about that, didn't I? When I did
You said the
Comics in Canon. And right, so you can contact us, guys, on Twitter at Comics in Motion P. If you want to email us, the Comics in Motion Podcast at gmail.com. And get onto the feed, guys. We've got loads of different shows that'll tickle your fancy. There's plenty of stuff you can get into if you're into the comic book world. And honestly, there's some great content creators on there that me and Dave are so proud of joined our sort of channel, aren't they, Dave? And they're really, really good guys as well. So just get over there and have a look on the feed. It's sensational. And also, if you do, and you do get 5 minutes, just drop us a review on the show or any of the other shows that you listen to on the Comics in Motion Network. And it just helps us get out there to more people on the iTunes charts and various other Google ones and things like that. So, Dave, I've talked enough, my friend. What are you going to lead us out with today?
Well, we start off, don't we, and we say, you know, with an average podcast comes no responsibility. But there's only one way to finish this one off, and say, remember, with great power comes great responsibility. I'll see you next week.
Bye.
Excuse me, I'm Eric Lensher.
James Xavier.
Go fuck yourself.
What in the...
Tell me something, my friend. You ever dance with the devil in the pale moonlight? What? I always ask that of all my prey. I just like the sound.
Let's not stand on ceremony here, Mr. Wayne.
Would you care to step outside?
Come to me, son of Jor-El! Kneel before Zod!
Why so serious? Let's put a smile on that face.
I am Iron Man.
I'm Batman.
Whoa!
Hey,